Sandra Hughes, a lively 59-year-old adventurer with a love for nature, decided to swap Maui's sunny beaches for the rugged beauty of California's Sierra National Forest. It was June 2020, a time when the world was stuck at home battling the COVID-19 pandemic. For Sandra, though, staying indoors was not an option. Nature was her escape, her therapist, and her best friend. So, while others baked sourdough and binged Netflix, Sandra packed her gear, ready for a solo camping trip in the wilderness she adored. Before setting out, Sandra made sure to touch base with her family. On June 26th, she called her niece Ashley, casually mentioning her plan to camp solo. For her, it was about reconnecting with herself, surrounded by whispering trees and starlit skies. But little did anyone know, this would be the last time anyone spoke to her. As the 4th of July approached, Sandra ventured to Johnson's Meadow, a picturesque spot nestled in the Sierra National Forest and not too far from Yosemite National Park. She set up her tent, probably humming a tune, as the sweet scent of pine filled the air. It was the perfect setting for her little escape. But as the days ticked by, things took a strange turn. On July the 2nd, hikers stumbled upon her campsite, and it was a sight straight out of a mystery novel. The tent was in complete disarray, and items were scattered as if a tornado had danced through the area. This wasn't like Sandra at all. She was the everything in its place type of camper. Alarmed, the hikers promptly contacted the authorities. Cue the search parties. Rescue teams combed through the dense forest, shouting Sandra's name and scanning every nook and cranny. But for days, it was as if she had vanished into thin air. Then, on July 6th, there was finally a clue. Her car was found near Chiquito Creek. The vehicle had a bit of damage, as though it had kissed a tree, but it wasn't wrecked enough to explain much. Witnesses claimed to have seen Sandra walking away from the car, looking disoriented but physically unharmed. Theories swirled. Did she crash because she was startled? Was someone or something chasing her? The Sierra National Forest is beautiful, sure, but it's also a place of eerie silence and shadowy corners. Had she stumbled upon something she wasn't supposed to see? Things got weirder on July 12th when her sleeping bag turned up 2.5 miles north of her car. Just imagine the forest, quiet, but for the rustle of leaves, and there, among the trees, her sleeping bag lying abandoned. How had she managed to cover such a distance on foot? Was she lost, wandering aimlessly, or was something or someone leading her deeper into the wilderness? The mystery deepened. Weeks turned into months, and hope began to waver. Sandra's family clung to slivers of optimism, but the search yielded nothing new. Then, on August 9th, a bizarre twist. 2 hunters reported seeing a woman matching Sandra's description near Portuguese Creek. She looked thinner, her clothes weathered. But here's the kicker, she seemed calm. Not frantic, not desperate, just serene. The hunters couldn't make sense of it, and before anyone could track her down, she vanished once again. By now, Sandra's story had taken on an almost mythical quality. The case went cold, and she became a ghostly figure in the Sierra National Forest's lore. But the plot thickened a year later, on July 21st, 2021. A family exploring the Madera County mountains reported seeing a mysterious figure lying motionless in a meadow. The woman's legs were oddly positioned in the air, and the sight gave them chills. Could this be Sandra, still out there, lost but somehow present in a way no one could explain? Sandra Hughes' disappearance has since become the stuff of legends, sparking countless theories and endless speculation. Was she a victim of foul play? Did she encounter wildlife? Or was her disappearance tied to something supernatural, a force beyond human understanding? The Sierra National Forest, after all, has its fair share of eerie tales. For her family, the unanswered questions are a constant ache. They yearn for closure, for a sign, for anything that might tell them what happened. Sandra's story remains an unsolved puzzle, a chilling reminder of how vast and mysterious nature can be. And while the forest whispers its secrets, the world continues to wonder what really happened to Sandra Hughes. Perhaps she found the solitude she craved, but in a way no one expected. Or maybe, just maybe, the Sierra holds her story, waiting for the right moment to reveal the truth. Until then, Sandra's legacy lives on as a haunting tale of adventure, mystery, and the untamed power of the wild. In the summer of 2015, the Kunz family set off for what seemed like a simple camping trip to Timber Creek Campground, a quiet retreat hidden deep in the Idaho wilderness. It was supposed to be a peaceful getaway, just a family enjoying the great outdoors. But what started as a routine adventure soon spiraled into a baffling mystery. Along for the trip were Vernal Kunz and Jessica Mitchell, their lively 2-year-old son, DeOrr Kunz Jr., Jessica's grandfather, Bob Walton, and Isaac Rainwand, a man whose presence added an air of mystery to the whole excursion. On the evening of July 9th, the group packed up their truck and hit the road, making their way through the rugged terrain. Along the way, they stopped for diesel, attempted to grab dinner in town but had no luck, and ended up settling for snacks from a convenience store before finally reaching the campsite in the dark. Little DeOrr, eager to help, assisted his parents in setting up camp and building a fire before the family turned in for the night, blissfully unaware of the nightmare that was about to unfold. The next morning started off like any other camping trip. The group lounged around the campsite, soaking in the peaceful atmosphere. At one point, Jessica asked her grandfather, Bob Walton, to keep an eye on DeOrr, while she and Vernal took a short walk around the area with Isaac. It should have been a simple request, one that any parent makes without a second thought. But by 2 p.m., their world was turned upside down. While fishing with Isaac, Jessica and Vernal suddenly realized that their son was nowhere to be seen. Panic set in as they rushed back to the campsite, calling his name and frantically searching the surrounding area. At 2:22 p.m., Vernal called 911, with Jessica making another desperate call at 2:26 p.m. Authorities were alerted at 2:28 p.m., and by 3:45 p.m., search and rescue teams arrived. What followed was a massive effort to locate the missing toddler. For 2 weeks, rescue teams scoured the rugged terrain using ATVs, helicopters, horses, K-9 units, and even drones. Despite their exhaustive efforts, there was no sign of DeOrr, not a footprint, not a shred of clothing, nothing. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. Then, in a shocking turn of events, 6 months later in January 2016, the Lemhi County Sheriff's Office dropped a bombshell. Vernal Kunz and Jessica Mitchell were officially named as suspects in their son's disappearance. Suspicion had been growing due to inconsistencies in their statements, and private investigator Philip Klein, who had been hired by the family, uncovered some troubling details. Both parents had undergone multiple polygraph tests, with Vernal reportedly failing 5 and Jessica failing 4. The inconsistencies in their stories, combined with the failed lie detector tests, raised serious questions about what really happened to DeOrr. Klein speculated that the child might have been the victim of foul play, whether accidental or intentional, and even accused Jessica of knowing more than she was letting on. The case grew even stranger when, in 2016, the couple was evicted from their home for unpaid rent. Among the abandoned belongings, investigators found DeOrr's camouflage jacket, the very one he was supposedly wearing when he disappeared. This discovery only deepened the mystery and fueled further suspicion. Despite all these strange twists, no arrests were ever made, and DeOrr Kunz Jr.'s disappearance remains an unsolved mystery. Vernal and Jessica separated in 2016, with Jessica eventually remarrying, but both have continued to insist they had nothing to do with their son's vanishing act. To this day, the case remains wide open, with no answers and no closure for the little boy who seemingly disappeared without a trace. The Timber Creek Campground, once just a peaceful escape, is now forever linked to one of Idaho's most baffling missing person case.
It was supposed to be the perfect New Year's Day, a fresh start in the crisp, snowy air of Mount Rainier National Park. Picture it, towering peaks, towering trees, and the kind of quiet that only a winter wonderland can offer. People were arriving, eager to ring in 2012 with a little mountain magic. But what began as a serene winter paradise quickly descended into chaos and heartbreak. Enter Margaret Anderson, a 34-year-old park ranger, mother of 2, and a beacon of dedication and warmth. Everyone who knew her would tell you she was the very definition of a park ranger: brave, compassionate, and always ready to protect the park and its visitors. Her smile could light up the coldest of winter mornings. But on this particular morning, Margaret was about to face something no one could have predicted. Out there in the snow, far from the peaceful embrace of the park, a man named Benjamin Colton Barnes was on the run. A former soldier with more than his fair share of demons, Barnes had just been involved in a violent incident in a Seattle suburb. And where did he think he could escape to? The calm beauty of Mount Rainier, of course. Because if there's one thing a guy on the run wants, it's to make a break for it through the wilderness. Right? As the park's visitors enjoyed the snowy beauty, a checkpoint was set up to make sure everything was safe and sound. That's when Barnes, in full military gear and probably thinking he could outrun the law, blasted right through it. His goal? Paradise. Literally, paradise is a place in the park, but it's also a word that perfectly summed up what he was hoping to find: peace, isolation, and perhaps a place to disappear for good. Margaret wasn't about to let that happen. Stationed at the checkpoint, she got the call. Without missing a beat, she and her fellow ranger, Daniel Kamich, set up a roadblock, determined to stop Barnes from reaching the heart of the park, where families were out, enjoying the snow. This was no place for a man like Barnes, and Margaret wasn't going to let him ruin what should have been a peaceful day. But the standoff turned violent fast. Barnes, desperate and armed, opened fire without warning. Margaret didn't stand a chance. In an instant, her life was taken. Her bravery, however, meant that the carnage could have been so much worse. By stopping Barnes from reaching paradise, she likely saved countless lives. Her sacrifice was the ultimate act of courage. What was once a serene landscape now echoed with grief. The peaceful sounds of nature were replaced by the harsh clamor of a manhunt. Law enforcement flooded the area, determined to track down Barnes. And, true to form, the wilderness swallowed him up. Eventually, he was found and met a tragic end in the very wilds he tried to escape into. But Margaret's story is more than just one of tragedy. It's a reminder of the dangers those who protect our national parks face daily. Her love for the land, her unshakable sense of duty, and her willingness to make the ultimate sacrifice will forever be etched into the park's history. The park that Margaret loved will always remember her, and so should we. That cold January morning is a reminder that life is fragile, and yet the spirit of those who dedicate themselves to protecting our wild spaces is unbreakable. Margaret Anderson's legacy will live on, forever intertwined with the park she loved and served.
It was supposed to be just another peaceful fishing trip, a father and son bonding over the thrill of reeling in the perfect catch. But for 12-year-old Garrett Bardsley, that morning at Kuberant Lake in Utah's rugged wilderness would be his last known moment before disappearing without a trace. Garrett and his father, Kevin, were part of a larger Boy Scout group, 18 boys and about 6 or 7 adults, enjoying a weekend of adventure in the Uinta Mountains. Like any eager young fisherman, Garrett was determined to snag a big one. Unfortunately, fishing can be a messy business, and before long, his socks, pants, and shoes were soaked through. Uncomfortable in his wet clothes, he decided to make a quick trip back to their campsite, just 250 feet away, to change. He assured his father that he'd be back in no time, ready to land a fish for breakfast. The campsite, Kuberant number 4, was up a hill, a short and familiar walk the group had taken multiple times before. It was a routine trek, nothing dangerous or unusual. So, Kevin watched as his son trudged off, thinking nothing of it and focusing back on his fishing. But minutes turned into 20 and Garrett was still nowhere to be seen. That's when a sinking feeling crept in. Concerned, Kevin packed up his fishing gear and made his way back to camp, expecting to find Garrett there. Maybe distracted by something or chatting with the other scouts. But when he arrived, his heart dropped. Garrett wasn't there. Even worse, none of the other boys had seen him. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. Panic set in fast. Kevin wasted no time sounding the alarm, alerting the rest of the group and calling in authorities. What followed was one of the largest search efforts in the area's history. Hundreds of searchers, both official and volunteer, poured into the wilderness, scouring every possible route Garrett could have taken. They searched on foot, on horseback, and even used trained search dogs, hoping for any sign of the missing boy. As the search stretched into the night of Sunday, August 21st, hope remained high. Maybe he had just wandered too far and would turn up tired, hungry, but otherwise fine. But as days passed with no sign of him, optimism faded. The only clue? A single Nike sock, Garrett's, discovered about half a mile away in a rugged boulder field. The sock was damp and wadded up, as if someone had pulled it off a wet foot. But beyond that, there was nothing. No footprints, no clothing, no signs of struggle, just silence. After 9 grueling days, the official search was called off, but Garrett's family refused to give up. Devoted friends and volunteers kept searching well into October, making trips back at least twice a week, desperate for answers. Even after the brutal winter of 2004, they returned in the spring to search again. Yet, despite every effort, no further clues ever surfaced. The mystery of Garrett Bardsley has since become the subject of intense speculation. Some believe he fell victim to a wild animal, perhaps a mountain lion or a bear. Others suspect foul play, suggesting he may have been abducted by a stranger, or even someone known to the group. Another theory is that he got lost or injured in the unforgiving terrain, unable to call for help. But with no evidence to confirm any of these ideas, all we're left with is speculation. Years later, Garrett's disappearance remains one of Utah's most perplexing mysteries. His story continues to raise awareness about missing children and the unpredictable dangers of the wilderness. Christina Calayca was a bright 20-year-old with big dreams and a heart full of energy. In August 2007, she packed up her adventurous spirit and headed to Rainbow Falls Provincial Park in Ontario, Canada, with her cousin Faith and 2 friends, Eddie and Joe. It was supposed to be a weekend of campfire vibes, stunning nature views, and some much-needed bonding time. Christina, known for her bubbly personality and dreams of teaching and missionary work, couldn't have been more excited. After pitching their tents near Whitson Lake under a sunny sky, the group got right into the camping groove. By nightfall, they were gathered around a crackling fire, swapping stories and laughing until their cheeks hurt. Life felt perfect. But, as they say, nothing gold can stay. Tired from all the fun, they hit their tents for a quick snooze, only to wake up late the next morning. Oops, no big deal. Just a minor hiccup in their adventure. Keen to make the most of the day, Christina and Eddie decided to kick things off with a morning jog. With the fresh air pumping them up, they explored the lush trails, marveling at the beauty around them. Then came the fateful decision. They split up to cover more ground. It seemed innocent enough, just a couple of curious souls soaking in the forest vibes. But that's where everything went sideways. Eddie returned to camp, but Christina didn't. At first, the group thought she might have taken a scenic detour, but as the minutes stretched into hours, panic set in. They shouted her name, scoured the trails, and searched every corner they could think of. When all else failed, they called in the big guns, the Ontario Provincial Police. Cue a full-blown search operation, helicopters buzzing overhead, K9 units sniffing through the forest, and search teams leaving no rock unturned. The park was combed inch by inch, but Christina was nowhere to be found. As days turned into weeks and weeks into years, hope began to waver. Christina's family held on as tightly as they could, pouring every ounce of energy into finding her, but the mystery only deepened. Today, Christina's disappearance remains an unresolved heartbreak. Her friends and family still cling to her memory, their lives forever marked by her absence. The search for answers continues, fueled by love and determination, even as time threatens to steal away the hope they hold dear.
It was just another summer morning in North Carolina, one of those days that promises nothing more than the usual calm of the Blue Ridge Parkway. The birds are chirping, the sun is shining, and all feels right with the world. But for Joseph David Kolodski, a seasoned park ranger with 13 years under his belt, it would be a day unlike any other. It would be the last day of his life. Now, Joe wasn't your average ranger. He was the kind of guy who knew every tree, every trail, and every hidden corner of the park like the back of his hand. If the Blue Ridge Parkway had a guidebook, Joe would have been the author. He was the rock that visitors leaned on, and the one who made sure everyone was safe as they hiked through the stunning but wild terrain. He wasn't just a park ranger, he was a protector of the park's magic, a living, breathing encyclopedia of the land. On June 21st, 1998, Joe headed out for what seemed like a routine patrol, leaving behind his wife and 3 kids. His task? To check out a report of someone armed with a rifle at the Big Witch Overlook, scaring the bejeebers out of park visitors. Just another day at the office, right? Well, not exactly. Joe, ever the professional, knew exactly what to do. He spotted the suspect from a distance and immediately radioed for backup. He kept his cool, staying out of sight while calmly planning how to handle the situation. Classic Joe, always thinking ahead, always ready for whatever the wilderness threw at him. But as he was about to approach the suspect, things took a wild turn. As Joe stepped out of his patrol car, the unthinkable happened. The person he was trying to help turned the tables and ambushed him, firing shots that shattered the park's usual silence. In the blink of an eye, a dedicated ranger's life was taken, and the tranquility of the park was broken forever. What followed was straight out of a bad movie. Another ranger arrived on the scene, only to find themselves caught in the crossfire. The suspect, ever the coward, bolted into the thick woods, disappearing into the very landscape Joe had spent years protecting. Despite heroic efforts from his colleagues and a quick response from emergency teams, Joe was airlifted to a hospital in Tennessee, where, heartbreakingly, he was pronounced dead. The park, once his safe haven, had become the scene of a devastating loss. The man responsible for Joe's death was eventually caught on the neighboring Cherokee Indian reservation. It brought some closure to the frantic manhunt and to the community. But let's be real, justice never really feels complete. Life without parole for the guy who took Joe's life didn't bring Joe back, nor could it fill the void in his family's hearts. Years have passed since that tragic day, but Joe's legacy is far from forgotten. Tributes, memorials, and stories keep his memory alive. Joe wasn't just a ranger. He was a mentor, a friend, a dad, and a husband. His life continues to inspire everyone, from seasoned rangers to those casual hikers who just wanted to enjoy the beauty he helped protect. His story isn't just about bravery. It's about the everyday, quiet heroism that goes unnoticed until tragedy strikes. As the seasons change and time moves on, the memory of that June day remains fresh. Joe Kolodski may be gone, but his spirit still lingers in the very land he dedicated his life to protecting. It's a reminder of the sacrifices made by the unsung heroes who keep our parks safe. They may not wear capes, but they sure make a difference.
On June 14, 1969, the Martin family, William, his wife, and their 2 sons, Dennis and his older brother, set off for a camping trip in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, hoping for a peaceful escape from city life. They arrived at Spence Field, where they pitched their tents and enjoyed the fresh mountain air. As the afternoon unfolded, Dennis and his brother joined 2 other boys for a game of hide-and-seek. Laughter echoed through the campsite as they plotted a playful prank to surprise the adults. At around 4:30 p.m., Dennis, wearing a bright red shirt, dashed into the trees while the others scattered. Moments later, the older boys reappeared, giggling over their successful trick, except Dennis never emerged from his hiding spot. At first, William Martin called out to his son, expecting him to come running, but as minutes passed and there was no response, unease crept in. While the Martins frantically searched for Dennis about 7 miles away, Harold Key and his family were hiking near Sea Branch when they heard a chilling scream cut through the forest. Moments later, they spotted a shadowy figure darting through the trees. Something about its movements unsettled them, but they had no idea their eerie encounter might be linked to a missing child. Back at Spence Field, worry turned into full-blown panic. As the sun set, darkness swallowed the forest, making the search even more difficult. At 8:30 p.m., a desperate William Martin reported his son's disappearance to park officials at Cades Cove. Just when things couldn't get worse, a thunderstorm rolled in, drenching the area with heavy rain and fierce winds. Still, searchers pressed on through the night, determined to find Dennis. By the next morning, the search had grown into a massive operation with over 240 volunteers, including park rangers, local Boy Scouts, and concerned hikers, combing the rugged terrain. Days passed, but no sign of Dennis was found, and theories about his fate began to emerge. Some believed he had simply wandered too far and was unable to survive in the wilderness. Others feared he had been attacked by a bear or a wild boar. The most unsettling theory, however, was that Dennis had been abducted. William Martin himself leaned toward this possibility, especially after learning about the unknown man spotted fleeing the woods near the time of Dennis's disappearance. The FBI and park rangers investigated the sighting, but no concrete evidence linked it to the case. On July 3rd, searchers came across a disturbing clue, a strong odor of decay near the west prong. Hopes of a breakthrough surged, but despite thorough investigation, no remains were found. The Martin family even offered a $5,000 reward for information, but it led nowhere. After months of relentless searching, park officials officially ended the hunt on September 11th. Then, in 1985, a ginseng hunter came forward, claiming he had found a child's skeletal remains 3 miles from Dennis's last known location. Investigators rushed to check, but once again, nothing was found. Decades later, Dennis Martin's disappearance remains one of the most haunting mysteries of the Great Smoky Mountains, an unsolved case that continues to spark speculation, debate, and heartache. In the summer of 1952, 10-year-old Connie Smith packed her adventurous spirit and headed from her home in Wyoming to Camp Sloan, a YMCA camp in Salisbury, Connecticut. It was supposed to be a fun getaway filled with new friendships and campfire tales, but little did anyone know, Connie's trip would become one of Connecticut's most baffling mysteries. The day of her disappearance started on a rocky note, literally. After a scuffle with other campers, Connie ended up with a bloody nose. Not one to let a little drama ruin her day, she shrugged it off and later told her tent mates she was heading out to grab an ice pack. What happened next? No one knows. Connie left behind her belongings, donned her blue shorts, a long-sleeved shirt, and a bright red windbreaker, and walked away with only a small black purse containing cherished photos. That was the last time anyone at Camp Sloan saw her. Witnesses later reported seeing Connie along Indian Mountain Road. Some remembered her picking daisies, while others recalled her asking for directions to Lakeville, Connecticut. But here's where it gets strange. Connie had mentioned feeling homesick, yet just days earlier, during her mom's visit, she seemed happy and even asked to stay longer. The mix of conflicting emotions only added to the enigma. 3 hours after realizing Connie was missing, camp counselors launched a search. Panic quickly spread. Witnesses claimed they saw Connie hitchhiking near the intersection of U.S. Route 44 and Belgo Road. A bold move for a 10-year-old, but not entirely surprising for someone as independent and self-reliant as Connie was known to be. Her disappearance unleashed a wave of concern that rippled far beyond the camp. Community members, state troopers, volunteers, and even aircraft from Westover Airfield and the Civil Air Patrol scoured the area. Flyers went up, search parties combed through the woods, and tips poured in from across the region. Truck drivers, carnival workers, and even traveling gypsies were scrutinized in hopes of finding any connection to Connie. Despite these exhaustive efforts, Connie remained elusive. Her disappearance became the largest missing person search in Connecticut's history, leaving everyone, from investigators to her heartbroken family, in turmoil. Her father, Peter Smith, joined the search, holding on to hope that his daughter would be found. But as weeks turned into months and then years, the case grew colder. Theories abounded. Reported sightings stretched from Canada to New York, sparking momentary hope, but each lead ultimately fizzled out. Investigators pursued numerous suspects, including William Henry Redmond, a former carnival worker with a suspicious past and a murder charge. Redmond seemed like a promising lead until he passed a polygraph test, and investigators couldn't place him in Connecticut at the time of Connie's disappearance. Then came the bizarre confession of Frederick Pope, a traveling salesman who told Ohio police he knew what happened to Connie. Pope implicated his associate, Jack Walker, claiming Connie had been abducted and murdered in Arizona. It sounded convincing at first, but under scrutiny, Pope's story fell apart faster than a poorly built campfire. Investigators found inconsistencies and no evidence to support his claims, leaving them back at square one. Connie's case, labeled B57H in state records, became one of Connecticut's most notorious cold cases. Even lead investigator Richard Chapman refused to give up, continuing to search for answers well into his retirement. Despite advancements in DNA technology and database cross-referencing, no breakthroughs were made. Connie's father passed away without ever knowing what happened to his little girl, and his obituary heartbreakingly acknowledged the ongoing mystery. As the years passed, theories and whispers persisted, but hard evidence remained as elusive as ever. Was Connie lured away by someone she trusted? Did she get lost in the wilderness, or was foul play involved? The questions linger, haunting the memories of those who remember her story. To this day, Connie Smith's disappearance remains a chilling mystery, frozen in time. It's a story of a young girl who vanished one summer day, leaving behind a trail of questions and a community forever searching for answers. Until the truth comes to light, Connie's tale stands as a somber reminder of the fragility of innocence and the enduring hope for closure.
Deep in the heart of southeastern Arizona, where the Chiricahua Mountains slice through the horizon, lies a mystery as haunting as the towering peaks themselves. This isn't a story of natural beauty or serene trails. It's the tale of a man who disappeared into this rugged landscape over 4 decades ago, leaving behind questions that still echo through the canyons. Paul Fugate, a 41-year-old park ranger at Chiricahua National Monument, wasn't just a guardian of the park. He was part of its fabric. Known for his passion for the outdoors and unwavering dedication to conservation, Paul was as familiar to visitors as the rock formations and trails he adored. He wasn't just a ranger. He was a cornerstone of the park's community. On January 13, 1980, a typical Sunday afternoon, Paul stepped out of the visitor center for a routine patrol. His destination, the recently acquired Faraway Ranch area, a new addition to the park he was eager to inspect. Dressed in his ranger uniform, badge gleaming, Paul told a colleague he'd be back by 4:30 p.m. With a casual wave, he headed down the trail and vanished into thin air. At first, his absence was barely a blip on the radar, but as the clock ticked past his return time, concern morphed into alarm. By evening, it was clear something was terribly wrong. The park, once Paul's sanctuary, seemed to swallow him whole. What followed was a massive search operation, tracking dogs, aircraft, volunteers from every imaginable agency scouring the unforgiving terrain. Yet, despite the exhaustive efforts, Paul had disappeared as if the land itself had erased him. For Dodie Fugate, Paul's wife, his disappearance was an unrelenting nightmare. "I feel as though a part of me has been sliced off," she once said, her grief palpable. Their life together, built on love and adventure, was shattered. The search for Paul wasn't just about finding him. It became a desperate quest for closure that stretched into decades. Speculation about Paul's fate has run rampant. Did he stumble upon something sinister in the park's remote corners? An illegal operation, perhaps? Or was it a tragic accident, his body lost to the wilderness? Theories abound, but without evidence, they remain frustratingly hollow. Even those closest to Paul, like his friend Barbara Elfrant, admit their once bright hope has dimmed over time. "I don't believe, as I did originally, that it will be solved," she confessed, burdened by decades of unanswered questions. In 2018, the National Park Service reignited the case, citing new evidence and upping the reward for information to $60,000. Yet, the details of this supposed breakthrough remain as elusive as Paul himself. For his family and friends, the mystery persists, along with the unrelenting ache of his absence. Dodie describes their bond as two halves of the same person. Her words carry the weight of a love that endures, even in the face of loss. Somewhere out there, she believes, lies the other half of her heart, waiting to be found. Paul Fugate's disappearance is a chilling reminder of nature's vastness, where beauty and danger intertwine. As the years pass, the quest for answers continues, leaving behind a story that's as much about loss as it is about the enduring human spirit.
Chelsea Grimm, a 32-year-old from San Diego, California, disappeared on September 28, 2023, while on a cross-country road trip. The last time anyone saw her, she was in Williams, Arizona, and the circumstances surrounding her vanishing remain as puzzling as ever. Her case is currently listed as missing, and the mystery continues to leave everyone scratching their heads. Chelsea set out on September 24, 2023, with plans to attend a wedding in Connecticut. Originally, she planned to fly, but when the airline wouldn't let her bring her pet bearded dragon, Roz, or Roxy, depending on the day, she decided to hit the road instead. Talk about dedication to your pet. She cruised through Phoenix, Arizona on September 27th, where she met up with her sister and a friend. However, the next day, she canceled plans for lunch with the same friend. Later that day, Chelsea was spotted at a motel in Seligman, Arizona, trying to book a room. She was described as acting a little disoriented, even trying to pay with euros instead of US dollars. Now, that's a sign something might not be right. She called her parents from the motel, letting them know her trip was taking longer than expected, and she wouldn't be making it to the wedding after all. She mentioned she was going to camp nearby for a few days before heading back to California. On September 28th, things took another strange turn when an officer found Chelsea's car parked near a war memorial in Williams, Arizona. She explained to the officer that she'd gotten emotional after taking photos for a lost soldier project and didn't want to drive while upset. The officer, being helpful, suggested some safe spots to camp, including a Love's truck stop. By September 30th, a woodcutter spotted Chelsea camping in her car near Ash Fork, Arizona. She didn't seem to be in any distress and appeared fine, but after that, silence. No calls, no texts, no social media posts. Then, on October 3rd, hunters stumbled upon Chelsea's white 2019 Ford Escape, abandoned on a Forest Service road in the Kabob National Forest, northeast of Ash Fork. The car had 2 flat tires, but no sign of Chelsea. The following day, her parents filed a missing person report with Phoenix PD, unable to reach her. When authorities checked the car, they found Chelsea's wallet, phone, sleeping bag, and bearded dragon were missing, but some of her clothes and a camera were left behind. The car was locked, and there were no signs of a struggle. Since her disappearance, there's been no activity on her phone, bank account, or social media. No one can figure out what happened, and police haven't found any evidence of foul play. The case is at a dead end, leaving a lot of room for speculation. Some believe Chelsea might have been going through a mental health crisis, given her confused behavior. After all, a photographer wouldn't leave their camera behind unless something was off. Others suspect she might have met someone, possibly even an abductor, and point to the euros she tried to pay with as a clue. Then there's the theory that outlaws could have deflated her tires and taken advantage of the situation to mug or kidnap her. Desperate for answers, Chelsea's family hired a private detective to help with the search, but so far, no new leads have turned up. The mystery of Chelsea Grimm's disappearance still has everyone puzzled. Her family and friends continue to hold on to hope that one day she'll come home safely and the truth will finally come to light. In May 1989, Charles Horvath-Allan set off on a solo adventure across Canada. Born in Ontario and raised in the UK, Charles was a free spirit with dreams as big as the open road. His goal was to travel from Quebec to British Columbia, soaking up the stunning scenery before heading to Hong Kong to celebrate his 21st birthday with his mom Denise. But things didn't quite go as planned. As Charles cruised through the beautiful landscapes of British Columbia, he found himself in Kelowna, a charming little town on Canada's west coast. It was at a campsite there, called Tiny Town, where his journey took an eerie turn. The last time anyone saw Charles was when he was cashing a check at a local bank on May 26, 1989. After that, he disappeared, poof, without a trace. Back in England, Denise was thrust into an absolute nightmare, desperate for any news of her missing son. With no support from local authorities, she took matters into her own hands, flying back and forth between Canada and England, plastering posters of Charles all over Kelowna, hoping someone might know something. But the answers she sought stayed just out of reach. Then came a mysterious note slipped under her motel door, suggesting Charles had been beaten to death and his body dumped in a nearby lake. Shocked and horrified, Denise immediately mobilized a search, sending divers to check the lake. But when they recovered a body, it wasn't Charles's, leaving her more confused and heartbroken than ever. But Denise wasn't about to give up. Year after year, she returned to Kelowna, relentless in her quest for answers. Her determination caught the attention of Locate International, an agency specializing in missing persons. With their help, Denise's search gained fresh momentum. They partnered with Leeds Beckett University to start a cold case unit focused on Charles's disappearance, diving deep into the case for any overlooked clues. Little by little, new details came to light, as witnesses began to speak up about their encounters with Charles in the days before he vanished. Each new piece of the puzzle gave Denise hope that the truth was within reach, but the mystery remained unsolved, and her fight for answers continued. Then, in August 2020, the High Court of Justice officially declared Charles dead under the Presumption of Death Act 2013. It was a bittersweet moment for Denise. Some closure, but still no peace. She vowed to keep searching for her son's remains, knowing the road ahead would be long and tough. But with the support of Locate International and Leeds Beckett University, Denise continues the search, refusing to let her beloved son be forgotten. For her, finding answers isn't just about closure, it's about honoring Charles's memory and making sure his story is never lost.
In July 1996, a haunting story unfolded in the sprawling wilderness of Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Parks in the heart of California's Sierra Nevada. It's a tale of nature's grandeur, human devotion, and the unsolved mystery of Randy Morgenson, an experienced backcountry ranger whose disappearance still echoes through the mountains he called home. Born in 1945 in Yosemite Valley, Randy's connection to the wild was lifelong. Raised in the shadow of granite cliffs and towering sequoia, he graduated from Yosemite Valley School and later dedicated 28 seasons to patrolling Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Parks. For Randy, these parks weren't just a job, they were a sanctuary. Known for his encyclopedic knowledge of the High Sierra, he was a quiet protector of the land, spending his mornings savoring coffee in the sunrise before setting out to preserve the wilderness he loved. Randy wasn't just a ranger, he was a guardian. His friend George Durkee recalled his calm demeanor and knack for ensuring the safety of visitors while safeguarding the pristine beauty of the park. He detested litter, humorously calling careless visitors snus americanus, and often carried sacks to collect garbage left behind. His work wasn't just a duty, it was a personal mission to ensure future generations could enjoy the wilderness as he had. On July 21, 1996, Randy set out from his station at Bench Lake for a routine patrol, planning to return in 2 to 3 days. A note left on his tent outlined his route, but in a minor slip, he mistakenly dated it June instead of July. He packed lightly, leaving behind his revolver, a choice that suggested he anticipated no trouble. But Randy never returned. Days passed without a radio check-in, and when his absence was noticed, his colleague Rick Sanger discovered the note and reported him missing. The search that followed was one of the largest in National Park Service history. Over 100 personnel scoured the rugged terrain, but not a single clue was found. It was as if Randy had vanished into thin air. Investigators uncovered hints of emotional struggles in Randy's personal life. A recent divorce and bouts of depression had weighed heavily on him. He had shared feelings of deep loss and questioned his life's worth, leaving those close to him wondering if these struggles had played a role in his disappearance. For years, Randy's fate remained a painful mystery. Then, in 2001, his remains were discovered near a creek in a gorge. It appeared he had suffered a tragic accident, likely falling through a snow bridge and succumbing to his injuries. Hidden beneath snow and ice, his body had been concealed from the massive search efforts. Theories about Randy's disappearance remain varied. Some speculate he might have staged his death to secure benefits for his ex-wife, while others accept it as an unfortunate accident. Whatever the truth, Randy's story is a poignant reminder of the beauty and unpredictability of the wilderness. Randy Morgenson's legacy lives on in the trails he patrolled and in the memories of those who knew him. His life and disappearance are a testament to the delicate balance between humans and nature, a relationship filled with wonder, danger, and enduring mysteries.
It was Labor Day weekend in 1975, and the Newton family from Manchester, Maine, was soaking up the great outdoors at Natanis Point Campground. Nestled deep in the woods near the Canadian border, it was the perfect spot for some classic camping fun: s'mores, campfires, and lazy afternoons by the water. No one could have imagined that this peaceful getaway would soon turn into one of the largest search and rescue missions Maine had ever seen. On the morning of September 1st, Ron Newton hopped into his pickup truck and rumbled off to gather firewood, assuming it would be a quick errand. But his 4-year-old son, Kurt, had other plans. Not wanting to be left behind, the little guy grabbed his trusty red tricycle and pedaled after his dad, his tiny legs pumping furiously as he followed the dusty road. Enter Lou Ellen Hansen, a 13-year-old girl from a neighboring campsite who happened to spot Kurt zooming past. She called out to him, but the determined toddler kept on trucking, completely focused on catching up to his dad. Meanwhile, Jack Hansen, Lou Allen's father and the campground's caretaker, was making his usual rounds when he stumbled upon a red tricycle abandoned near the campground's dump. Not thinking much of it, he did what any groundskeeper might do. He tossed it onto the trash heap and went about his day. Back at the campsite, Jill Newton, Kurt's mom, was scrubbing mud off his sneakers when she suddenly realized he was nowhere in sight. At first, she figured he must be nearby, but after asking a few campers if they'd seen him, the sinking feeling in her stomach started to grow. When Ron returned and confirmed Kurt hadn't been with him, panic set in. Desperate, they ran into Jack Hansen and asked if he had seen their son, specifically a little boy riding a red tricycle. Jack's face must have said it all. "The tricycle?" he responded. "Yeah, I saw it, but no kid." When he led them to the dump, there it was, tossed onto the trash pile like a forgotten toy. But Kurt was gone. What followed was a massive search effort, unlike anything Maine had seen before. First, the Newtons and fellow campers scoured the area, calling Kurt's name and checking every possible hiding spot. Then, authorities arrived, bringing in game wardens, tracking dogs, and even helicopters equipped with loudspeakers to blast Kurt's name through the dense forest. As the search stretched on, Jill Newton overheard volunteers discussing high-tech aircraft used in the Vietnam War, planes designed to detect heat signatures from great heights. If they could find enemy soldiers in the jungle, surely they could find a lost little boy in the Maine woods, right? Without hesitation, she pushed for one of these planes to be brought in. The state acted quickly, flying in the specialized aircraft from Florida, hoping for a miracle. But no miracle came. Days passed, and despite thousands of volunteers combing the woods, Kurt was nowhere to be found. His mother, refusing to give up, even dug into a deep hole in the forest that looked like the perfect hiding spot for a scared child. But it was empty. By September 12th, after 10 grueling days, the official search ended. Over 3,000 people had scoured every inch of the wilderness, yet not a single clue surfaced. Theories ran wild. Some believed Kurt had simply gotten lost, wandering deeper into the woods and away from the campsite. Given the freezing nighttime temperatures, survival would have been nearly impossible. But Kurt's parents had a different theory, one far more unsettling. What if their son hadn't been lost at all? What if he had been kidnapped? With the Canadian border so close, they feared he might have been taken across into Quebec. Determined to chase this possibility, they flooded Quebec with missing child posters, even translating them into French to reach more people. Sadly, their search yielded no solid leads. To this day, the disappearance of Kurt Newton remains one of Maine's most haunting unsolved mysteries. The little blonde-haired boy who set off on his tricycle that morning was never seen again. Laura Vogel was a seasoned camper and outdoor enthusiast with a passion for surfing and hiking. But on February 21, 2010, her solo camping trip in the Poela area outside Maui took a dark and baffling turn. She vanished without a trace. Laura, who had recently made Maui her home, planned to camp out near the POA Point Lighthouse under the stars. She even stopped by a friend's house that day, casually mentioning her plans. Decked out in a blue shirt and gray sweatpants, she set off for her adventure, but by the next morning she was nowhere to be found. When Laura didn't show up for work, her family's concern went into overdrive. They contacted Maui police, only to be hit with the dreaded wait 24 hours rule. Not ones to sit idly by, her friends took matters into their own hands. Their search led to a chilling discovery. Laura's van, abandoned on a grassy roadside. The passenger door was wide open, the keys dangled in the ignition, and her laptop lay on the back seat. But her cell phone? Gone. Adding to the eerie scene, the van was parked near a transient camp notorious for shady dealings. Police dove into the investigation, scouring the area and questioning everyone nearby. 2 days later, the plot thickened when Laura's cell phone was found smashed to pieces. A review of her phone records revealed a twist. After Laura texted a friend about her camping spot, her phone dialed a number she'd never called before. That number belonged to a homeless man from the transient camp. He denied any involvement, and a polygraph didn't help his case either. Still, he remained a person of interest. Laura's family was torn between heartbreak and confusion. They couldn't reconcile her disappearance with her responsible, risk-averse nature. The transient camp, with its reputation for crime and drugs, only deepened their fears. They questioned the thoroughness of the investigation, particularly regarding the camp and its residents. 2 theories emerged. One suggested Laura might have slipped off a cliff while navigating the rugged terrain in less than ideal footwear, flip-flops. Her family dismissed this as unlikely, given her experience and caution. The other, far more troubling theory, pointed to foul play, with the strange phone calls and the condition of her van fueling suspicion. Determined to find answers, Laura's loved ones launched their own search efforts, hired private investigators, and kept her story alive. Despite the passing years, they refused to give up hope. To this day, Laura's case remains a haunting mystery, but her family continues to fight for the truth, believing that someone out there knows what really happened that fateful night.
Let us take you on a journey to the heart of Yellowstone National Park, where the trees whisper secrets and the mountains stand tall, watching over the land like ancient guardians. There lived a ranger who wasn't just a part of the landscape, he was the landscape. Meet Dwayne P. McClure, a man so connected to Yellowstone that it was hard to tell where he ended and the wilderness began. Born into a world where the wind seemed to talk and the rustling leaves held stories, Dwayne was practically raised by nature. From the moment he could walk, he was out there, listening to the land's every murmur. While most kids were learning their ABCs, Dwayne was learning to read the forest's silent language. Trees, rivers, wildlife. He understood them all like old friends. Dwayne wasn't just a ranger. He was a living, breathing part of Yellowstone. For 10 years, he worked with the National Park Service, serving as a steward of the land that shaped him. Each morning, as dawn's first light bathed Yellowstone Lake in gold, Dwayne would silently glide across the water in his canoe, a figure at peace with the world. He moved with the grace of someone who'd spent lifetimes in the wild. For him, the mountains weren't just beautiful, they were home. The park gave him a sense of purpose, a peace only nature can offer. He knew every trail like the back of his hand, every grove of trees, and all the animals that called Yellowstone home. But Dwayne was more than just a ranger. He was the kind of guy who could make you laugh, even on the hardest days. He was a son, a brother, a friend, and a force of nature in his own right. His love for the land was infectious, and anyone who crossed his path couldn't help but feel drawn to it and to him. Then came May 22, 1980. It was just another beautiful spring day, with the park blooming in color, when Dwayne set out on his usual patrol across Yellowstone Lake. The waters were still, the skies stretched endlessly above him, and all was quiet, too quiet. Hours passed, and Dwayne didn't return. His radio calls went unanswered, and soon worry turned into panic. Rangers and volunteers who had known Dwayne like family rushed to search the lake, but despite their best efforts, they found only one thing: his canoe, capsized and abandoned. It was a chilling sight, like the lake itself had swallowed its guardian, keeping its secrets hidden beneath the surface. Despite an intense search, Dwayne was never found. The wild, which he had loved so deeply, had kept its silence. Years passed, and though the mystery of his disappearance lingered, Dwayne's legacy didn't fade. His life became a symbol of the sacrifices made by those who dedicate themselves to preserving the wild. As the seasons changed, the story of Dwayne P. McClure continued to echo through Yellowstone. His spirit, forever entwined with the wind, the water, and the land he adored, still whispers across the park he once called home.